This is the lecture for Wednesday, the 23rd of March, 2022, in Ancient and Medieval History. We've gotten up to the really late Roman Empire. However, there is an error in your notes that I feel the need to correct. I had told you of the story out of order. The correct order: Julian the Apostate tries to return Rome to paganism. Western Roman Emperor Valentinian and Eastern Roman Emperor Valens notice pressures on their borders because of the Huns pressing the Goths into Rome's borders. Valens accepts a group of Goths, actually a major nation of Goths, into the Eastern Roman Empire as federati, allies. But he treats them poorly. His officials don't dance around their vanities. And this causes them to revolt, kill the officials, which brings Valens in to fight and destroy them. And at the Battle of Adrianople, Valens is killed, his army is destroyed, the Goths have stirrups, and it's over. And then after that, you have the time of Theodosius, who unifies the empire but is diplomatic to the various Gothic peoples. And you have Honorius and Alaric the Visigoth, who sacks Rome, and then Gaiseric the Vandal, who really sacks Rome. So, sorry about the out of order. I put Valentinian and Valens later than they should have been put. We are in now the mid-400s, which is the mid-5th century. And in the mid-5th century, the Huns are a reality that is on the northern fringe of Rome's lands. In fact, in Eastern Europe, if you know your geography, the land of Hungary is named after the Huns. Although the Hungarians themselves call it Magyarország, the land of the Magyars, were a different group of cavalry invaders who come in about 800 years later. So, thank you. The Huns managed to basically take over all of the territory north of the Roman Empire. What they do is they conquer the Gothic tribes and the German tribes and the other tribes north of the Black Sea, and they control this vast empire. But unlike Rome, obviously, it's not an organized empire. It is an empire based on the charisma and ability of Attila, the greatest king of the Huns. Attila, whose name strikes terror in the heart of all good peoples. Now, who are these Huns that Attila rules? Question. What? Okay, there's a staple. You staple this to your test. If you get your test back, just reconnect them, give it to me, no problem. It's just it wasn't there when I opened it. So it must have gotten detached. Not a problem. All we have to do is fix it. The Huns are a little bandy-legged people. Now, what does bandy-legged mean? Well, since the Huns learned to walk after they learn to ride, their knees tend to form in a slightly different way. And so they tend to be bandy-legged. And when I say the Huns learn to ride before they learn to walk, I'm not joking. The key to survival in the Great Plains north of China, which is where the Huns come from, is mastering the horse. So like the Turks and the Mongols after them. The Huns are a people of the horse. Now, the Huns are a Turkic people, an Asiatic people, people with mixed North Asian and Turkic blood. And they are vast in number. They ride these shaggy little ponies, and they are incredibly tough. If you had to look at a Hun, you wouldn't think much of him. Little guy, probably about 5 feet tall, if he's tall. A little shorter, if not. Wiry, muscular, but not Arnold muscular, not big muscles. Just little wiry guy. Probably looks more like a teenage boy than a full-grown man. But these guys, they can take pain and they can give it. They can endure hardship. Because where they come from is so much more difficult than where they are going. If you can survive and prosper in the great steppes, it's because you are tough. So, the Huns are tough, but they're also fearsome and merciless. So they've got the physical toughness to back it up. But imagine an entire nation of psychopaths. Now, this isn't what they really were in the sense of mentally ill, violent people. But the Huns conveyed to everyone their love of violence and their willingness to do it at the drop of a hat. They were the scariest people in the room. One of my favorite comics from the 80s is a miniseries called Watchmen, which they made into a movie a while back. And there's this guy with no superpowers except he's incredibly psychotic. His superhero name is Rorschach. He's like Batman, but he replaces the wealth with just a viciousness. What?
Oh no, I was just...
You're just telling what your grades are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Happy guy.
It's the same process.
Well, what if they weren't? What if you embarrassed Chauncey by getting a better grade than he did? Huh? Huh? Ever think of that? Merciless little Hun. So, Rorschach is sent to prison. And the prisoners hate him, and they're going to kill him. So, in the chow line on his first day, Rorschach manages to take a friolator and dump it over a few of his enemies, which is a horrible thing to do. Not easy either. And as everyone is shocked, and to shock a room full of prisoners is pretty difficult. I mean, these are death row, not quite death row, but they're violent offenders. Rorschach says, "You don't understand. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me." Yeah. Now, that has always been my attitude in front of a classroom. At charter, it's not so necessary. But at some of the other schools I've taught, I have to be very clear to the students through my actions and my words that as edgy as they may think they are, I'm worse. And if you push it, you'll see that side of me. It works. It is a good form of getting people's attention. Again, I don't have to do that here very often, Dan.
Hey.
But that's the way the Huns are. They are simply scary guys. I don't know if you've ever met anyone in your life, I have, who you just encounter and everything, dink, you're awake, you're completely aware. Why? Because your fight or flight instinct has been tripped off just by being in the presence of someone. Oh, hell, yes, I have met people like that. They are people I never turn my back on. They are people I never stop being watchful around. They are people that I make sure I have a clear path to my weapon if I need it. Because scary people, they exist. The Huns are an entire nation of people like this. That's what I'm trying to convey to you. And Attila is the brilliant, ruthless leader of them. The Romans begin to call him the scourge of God. Now, a scourge is like a cat o' nine tails whip, but at the end of the whip strands are hooks. So what you do with a scourge, it's a really nasty punishment tool, is you whip somebody's back, and then when you pull it out, the hooks grab flesh, and so you're pulling chunks of flesh off somebody's back as you're whipping them. It's a nasty, hardcore device. And Attila is the scourge of God. That's what he's called. Yeah.
I feel like that would be kind of inefficient, because wouldn't the hooks not really all stick in?
It's not the point.
What?
Even if 2 or 3 stick in,
Yeah.
you're still dealing with ripping flesh off someone's back, and you're going to whip them multiple times.
Who cares if it's efficient?
So it looks scary.
Repeated.
It looks scary, and again, if you do it repeatedly, sooner or later, you're going to hurt somebody bad. And the point that you're conveying is, if any of you, because really, punishment like this isn't just about the person you're whipping, it's about everyone who witnesses it. That's why everyone on a ship back in the olden days, if somebody was going to be whipped or flogged, is what they called it in the Navy, everyone had to witness the punishment. Because the punishment wasn't just for the person who screwed up. The punishment is there to warn anyone, if you screw up, discipline will be retributive. It will be horrible. It will be out of proportion. It's not like having a punishment that fits the crime. No, you have a punishment that's so far out there that the crime has nothing to do with it. Basically, don't cross the line or horrible things are going to happen to you. In any event, Attila is the king of the Huns. Now, he grows up in his father's camp, and Attila's father's a great king of the Huns too, but not as great as Attila. And Attila has a brother named Bleda, and those two are competitive. But there's a Roman who grows up in the Hunnic camp. He's there as a hostage. His name is Aetius. Aesius and Attila know each other growing up. They play games, and Aetius is a Roman who learns the ways of the Huns. When Aetius' hostage time is over, he goes back to Rome, Constantinople and Rome, mostly Rome, and he becomes Rome's Hun expert, the general who understands these crazy Asiatics. Attila extorts huge amounts of money from the Eastern Roman Empire by raiding it, until the Eastern Romans basically beg Attila, how much money do we have to pay you to get you to leave? And Attila names some ridiculously high price, and they pay it. This is not a strong way of dealing with enemies. The Romans on both sides, east and west, are so weak that they are tumbling over each other to pay the barbarians off. But what the Eastern Roman Emperor does is even more nasty. Because the Eastern Roman Emperor pays the Huns not just to leave the Eastern Empire alone, but to go after the West. Ha 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 ha. Oh, that's nasty. Think about that. He's a Roman emperor in Constantinople who is setting up the other Roman Empire for really nasty problems. He is sending the worst group of hombres that exist against Western Roman Empire. And it works. So the Romans in the West suddenly deal with a Hunnic invasion. By the way, what I've just handed you is everything that I have except for what was done this morning. Fix it if you want better grades. Get it to me by Friday if possible. Friday close of business. That would be a good idea, and it would be a good idea to check your grades too, to see how you're personally doing, and if you want to pass, fix things.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Attila invades across the Rhine River into the Western Roman Empire. Aetius is there in command of Western Empire's remaining legions and a Gothic army and the Burgundians. At Chalons, Chalons. At Chalons, Chalons. At Chalons, Chalons. Aetius meets Attila. And for the only time in his life, Attila is beaten on the battlefield. This is a man who has fought literally hundreds of engagements. He has ruled over an empire almost as big as Rome's, north and east of Rome's, stretching out into the lands north of the Black Sea that we now call the Ukraine. And Attila loses to Aetius at the Battle of Chalons. Very important. So Attila goes back to his palace in Hungary. The emperor in the West, how can I put this? Just like the old emperor Honorius was afraid of Stilicho, the current emperor is afraid of Aetius. He thinks Aetius is going to want to become emperor. So Aetius is betrayed and killed in a plot. Bye-bye. Attila's still around. So the next year, Attila invades the Roman lands, but this time there's no Aetius to organize a group against him, and Attila's marching on Rome. At this moment, a change of power becomes evident. The emperor is hiding out in Ravenna, in the swamps south of Venice. He's not doing anything about Attila. I mean, Attila is invading Rome. Gaiseric the Vandal had invaded Rome. Alaric the Visigoth had invaded Rome. So he's out of there. You know who's in Rome leading the people? Pope Leo, who's called Pope Leo the Great. Pope Leo the Great, the night before the attack, crosses the Tiber River and meets with Attila. We don't know what happened. Attila was famously superstitious. Even if he didn't believe in a god, he still respected the god's taboos and tried not to violate them, because Attila didn't want to get bad luck. And here's Pope Leo, the leader of the Christian faith in the West. Often he is called the secret Western Roman Emperor, because while the real Western Roman Emperor is a bit of a pipsqueak, Pope Leo has guts and character and wisdom and strength of will. Or Pope Leo went out with a whole bunch of silver and gold and gave them to Attila to lead. Or both. Leo might have impressed Attila with the holiness of Rome and his presence, or he might have paid him off, or he might have impressed him with his holy presence and paid him off. What we know is that Attila turns around without sacking Rome and goes back to Hungary, where that winter, he has a party. And in that party, he has a red-haired slave wife named Ildiko. And Ildiko hates him because she's with Attila because Attila used to love a woman named Incata, and Ildiko looks like Incata. After a feast, Ildiko is found with Attila, who's dead. Bye-bye. So, Attila the Hun, scariest of scary men, is killed with the connivance of his slave wife, Ildiko. Without Attila to unify his empire falls apart into a bunch of tribes. The Huns are still there, but they're never going to be the great threat that they were. Now it's 20 years after Attila. Italy has a massive group of Ostrogoths, that's Eastern Goths, that occupy it. Spain has a massive number of Visigoths. Gaul has a massive number of Franks. North Africa has a massive number of Vandals. Britannia, which has been abandoned, is now under the assault of the Anglo-Saxons. The last Roman emperor is named very heroically Romulus Augustus. I'm going to be named after the founder of Rome and the founder of the empire. He's a teenage boy and he's terrified of his bodyguard, King Odoacer of the Ostrogoths. In a sort of nasty nickname, he's called Romulus Augustulus, which is little bitty Romulus, little bitty Augustus. He's known to history as Romulus Augustulus. And after an argument with his bodyguard, Odoacer chases him, finds him under a table, kills him. But what's interesting is instead of becoming emperor himself, or instead of finding some pipsqueak to be emperor as a symbol because he's Roman, Odoacer says, enough of this. This is my kingdom. No more Rome. No more Rome. This is now the Ostrogothic kingdom of Italy. I am king, not emperor, king of the Ostrogoths. In effect, this in the year 476 is the final end of the Roman Empire. It does not end with a bang, it ends with the whimper of Romulus Augustulus as he's killed by Odoacer. So there's the story of the leaders. Geographically, Rome is replaced by the new Rome, Constantinople. Constantinople is great and strong. Rome becomes weaker and weaker. The barbarian federati end up occupying larger and larger swaths of Roman territory, and they have less and less to do with Roman culture. Again, the Romans are inviting people in that they can't control, people who have no interest in becoming Romans. Their territory is no longer Roman at all. The empire splits permanently after the time of Theodosius in the late 300s, and ultimately the Western Empire, which is the poorer half of the Roman Empire, doesn't include any of the Greek territories. It's Italy, Spain, France, Britain, North Africa, areas west of the Middle Danube. That is all now gone. Visigoths take over the Kingdom of Spain, the Franks take over what will become the Kingdom of France. The Ostrogoths take over Italy for a while until the Burgundians come in, and then the Lombards, and it's just a chaotic mess. Now, when a group of Germans, when any nation goes on the move, it is called a Volkswanderung. That's what it's called in German. And it should be in your notes, but if not, I am writing it for you so that you can write it down. It is spelled Volkswanderung. Volkswanderung. And what a Volkswanderung is the movement of an entire nation of people. Every man, woman, and child, every slave, every animal, every possession is on the move. That is a Volkswanderung. And that's what hits Rome in the West and destroys it. The barbarian federati are no longer even symbolically controlled by Rome. The barbarian federati divide up the Western Roman Empire. Now, one of the weird things is the barbarians never number more than a few hundred thousand. The Roman population is many, many times that, over 10 times that. They're in the millions. So how is it that millions of people can lose their society to hundreds of thousands of people? How is it that a single bully can terrify an entire schoolyard? It's not just weapons. It's attitude. Attitude. The attitude of the bully is, I'm a predator, you're prey. I don't mind fighting. I kind of like it because I usually win. But even if I don't win, I'm going to keep on fighting. Most people don't want to do that. The bully's attitude is what gives him power. And it's the same willingness to do violence attitude that makes the Huns so scary, and it's the same attitude that gives the barbarians control over Rome. There's small numbers, but it's as if the biker gangs of society on horseback take over everything, and nobody has the gumption to stop them. Not the Romans anymore. They're too civilized. They're too peaceful. Folks wonder, when an entire nation invades your country to try to make it their country, and it worked in the Western Empire, it fell. AD 476. Now, look at your notes for that page that has those three border diagrams. Defense in depth is on the bottom of those. It's the second to last page of your handout. So we're going back to the second to last page of the handout. This is the strategy, grand strategy of the dominate. Everything that's valuable is put behind walls. You see on the border, a series, there's the road. The old city has little walls around it. There are little square fortifications along the border to allow units to retreat behind walls if there's an enemy attack. There are the old pre-Roman walled towns that are on the hilltops that are inhabited again. And what Diocletian sets up, and the other Romans of the Dominate continue to build, are mile castles along Rome's highways. They fortify everything. There's a fortified granary off to the right side of the map. And so the enemy invades, but instead of being able to deeply and quickly penetrate Rome's territories and raid a bunch of unwalled settlements, everything valuable has been placed behind walls. And the thing about barbarian raiders is they don't have siege towers. They don't have catapults. They don't have ballistic. They don't have battering rams. Really, they don't have anything that's going to help them get through walls. They may build some ladders. They may have an ad hoc battering ram, but it's not the same thing. By putting everything behind walls, what the Romans do is they make it harder for the barbarians to do anything quickly. They slow them down. It's like trapping somebody in mud or quicksand. What you're doing is you're slowing them down, which allows one of the imperial field armies under one of the emperors to come up and hit you. But it's not just the field army, because the old men and boys who are inside the walls can come out and nip at the heels of the barbarians too. Instead of the barbarians being in an open field, they are in amidst a bunch of fortifications, large, medium, and small. It's like being stuck in a minefield. You can't just run in any direction you want, because otherwise you'll step on a mine and go kablooey. The barbarians can't just move anywhere they want. They've got fortifications all around them that they haven't beaten. And that is going to make Rome's territory much harder for the barbarians to penetrate. This is called defense in depth. But because, and we can go back to the notes now, because the Roman army is so weak and small, the Romans begin taking barbarians in. At first, the barbarians have to learn Latin. They have to put on Roman-style uniforms. They have to fight in the Roman fashion under Roman officers. But after Adrianople particularly, the barbarians say, hey, you weaklings want us to be the big strong men. Fine. Pay us well and stay the hell out of our way. We're going to do things our way. We're not going to wear your sissy uniforms. We're not going to speak your prissy Latin. We're not going to do anything like you do, because you're weak. We're strong. If you want us, you hire us as we are. We'll be federati. We won't be slaves. Economically, high taxes come ridiculously high taxes. 60, 70, 80% of your income may go to taxes. Wage and price controls stifle the economy. And what wealthy people are expected to do out of the goodness of their hearts is spend a lot of their own money on public works projects. So if your family is rich, you're expected to buy a new aqueduct for your town, or to repair the city walls with your own money, or to build a new fountain, or a new bathhouse. All out of the goodness of your heart because you're rich and you're Roman, and that's expected of you. And we're still going to take 60 to 70% of your income, rich boy. The taxes become so great, wealthy people began, listen closely, wealthy people begin selling themselves into slavery to avoid the tax man. What? Wealthy people sell their freedom away to become slaves to avoid the tax man? Yes, this begins to happen so much that under Theodosius, a law is passed forbidding that. It still happens. The law says you will do the job that your daddy did. Your daddy was a gardener. If you have a black thumb, if plants wither and die, even as you walk by, you're going to be a gardener. Your daddy was a doctor. You could be clumsy as all heck and stupid too. You're going to be a doctor. Your job is locked in by law. This is the beginning of real feudalism. The Middle Ages concept that you are what your daddy does. And it starts in the Dominate to keep people from evading their taxes, from evading their financial responsibilities to the empire. Now, what we have in the empire is a mixture of currency for big purchases and barter for little purchases. So the full currency reforms that Diocletian sets up never really fully work. The money is there, but it's side by side with chickens and eggs for beef and milk. This is not a good sign. This is a sign that Rome is basically surviving, but it's not thriving. The civilian lifestyle that all the prosperity and the Principate and the Pax Romana depends on, that's gone. Everyone is behind walls. Imagine this. Let's say you have a nice house with a yard and your own room. But suddenly things change and you're living in an apartment. You've got to share your room with 2 or 3 siblings. You don't have privacy anymore. You're not on your own routine anymore. Everything is scheduled. This is what happens to Rome when everything is moved behind walls. People don't eat their own meals at their own times anymore. They eat at the cafeteria. Everyone eats together. Everyone does everything together. Instead of being an independent-minded individual, you're part of the group that is behind the walls, and you've got to conform to the group. Oh, think about how much fun that must have been. That was the price of survival. So we have the rise of feudalism, which I'll describe more in the next unit. The persecution of Christians is replaced because of In hoc signo vinces, the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, and Constantine's ideas in general, with a Christian church that becomes the national church of Rome. Soon pagans are on the back foot and Christians are dominant. There's even some persecution, but not too much. As to the Goths and Germans, 100 years before they conquer Rome, they're Christian. They're Arian Christian, but they're Christian. And this is going to make them less likely to destroy churches and despoil monasteries and kill priests. The problem of imperial succession could have been solved by Diocletian. The tetrarchy could have worked, but it didn't. Because the moment Diocletian wasn't there to enforce it, the greed and fear of everyone who was near imperial power reasserted themselves, and you can't trust people. We might seem to be partners, but I expect that you're plotting against me, and so I'm going to plot against you. You're going to betray me. I'm going to betray you first. Like with what?
Macbeth.
Yes. So this system of replacing emperors in 20-year terms that Diocletian sets up as the Tetrarchy will not survive him, because without him to enforce it, everyone's afraid they're about to be betrayed. The foreign threats continue as extremely dangerous. Rome's armies have deteriorated. The Goths are stronger than ever. The Germans are in these massive federations. They are massively more powerful than they used to be. And the Persians continue to be a superpower on the east. Now, there are some sample vocab terms in your notes, which you probably should know. Let's see. Okay. Barbari, the barbarians, people who don't speak Latin. Parthians, empire to the east before the Persians. Germans, people who live across the Rhine River. Persians, people who live in the east who conquer the Parthians. Goths, super Germans from Sweden. Huns, little scary guys from Asia. Attila, the king of the Huns. Meditations, the book of Marcus Aurelius. Intense specialization is what people did during the Pax Romana and the Principate, when they could focus on just one job, and it really built a lot of wealth. Hyperinflation because of donatives. Donatives are those bonuses emperors pay when they win a civil war. The Chi-Rho is the monogram of Christ. It looks like a PX. A martyr is a person who dies for the faith, in this case usually Christian. People sell themselves into slavery. Zealots are the anti-Roman Jewish terrorists. And lead. Now we come to lead. Why did the Roman Empire fall? Well, one of the reasons is stirrups and barbarians. The Goths have stirrups. The Romans at first don't. Eventually the Romans get stirrups. But the Goths still have the attitude of the fighter. The Romans are afraid. Who's going to win? The guy with the attitude of the fighter. So yeah, the barbarians are strong, but that's not all. The second answer that I posit is decadence. The Romans are spiritually weak. They're flabby. They had it good for so long that the individual forgot that their job is to fight in life, to fight for what you want, to fight for what you believe in, to be hardcore. Instead, the Romans try to figure out how many food items they can cram down their throat before they have to stick a feather down their throat in the vomitorium. Instead of having babies in functioning families, more and more Romans just have orgies for pleasure and prevent themselves from having children because it's so hard. The Roman population never recovers from the plague that kills Lucius Verus late in the Pax Romana. Even the Byzantines have the same problem, because the Romans are not vigorous spiritually, emotionally. They don't grab life. They compromise. Plague weakens their population. But here's something we haven't talked about yet. All that Roman fountains and waterworks and aqueducts, all of them are soldered by lead. Soldered by lead. Pipes united by lead. Melt a little lead along the edge and put them together and they'll become one unit. Soldered by lead. What's wrong with lead? What's wrong with lead? Raise your hand.
Your bones.
It's not just your bones. Yeah?
Oh no.
If you consume it, it deteriorates your brain functions.
Yeah. It messes with your neurons firing. We know that now. It basically destroys your nervous system. Now, I don't know how important you think the central nervous system is to a human being. That's your brain, your spinal column, and your nervous system. But most of us kind of think it's the most important part of us. Then again, what's telling you that? Your brain. Of course I'm the most important. I'm your brain. Selfish, vain, glorious narcissist. Yeah.
We're not people. We're just brains stuck inside of a bone cage, stuck inside of a meat.
There we go. And the problem is, lead messes with the brain part. How can that affect Rome after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and dozens of generations of people growing up drinking lead-tainted water? One of the most horrible possibilities is that even if the barbarians hadn't been bad, even if the Romans had been vigorous, maybe this accounts for their ongoing lack of vigor. There are people plagued by lead poisoning, and it does affect them. Romans just don't seem to be as energetic or intelligent as they used to be. And it may very well be because of the lead poisoning that they all suffer from. The folks wandering of the Federati, yeah, that's probably part of it too. When an entire nation of people shows up at your door, you better either fight them off or beat them so that they come into your country on your terms. But if they fight their way in, they're going to come in on their terms. And that is going to be beaucoup bad. Beaucoup bad. Very, very bad. Why else? Look at the costs of survival. 60, 70, 80% tax rate, living behind walls, living in a routine, in a regimen, losing your personal freedom, your privacy, your freedom of choice, losing the ability to eat alone, losing the ability... for what? Eventually, the Romans who survive, and by the way, most don't. When the barbarians take over Western Empire, there is a massive die-off of people. Because people who had depended upon the systems of water that the Romans built no longer have water coming through the pipes. The aqueducts are destroyed. The cities become much less inhabitable. So there's a massive die-off of human beings with the fall of the Western Empire. But those who survive adapt, and many of them seem happier because the barbarians aren't that involved. As long as you give them what you say you're going to give them, if it's a certain amount of food every few months, as long as you do that, they'll leave you alone. But the Roman government was involved. It meddled. In everything you did, it meddled. So for a lot of people, eventually the costs of survival become worse than the possibility of the empire dying. Chemotherapy is the preferred method of dealing with cancer. Cancer is when the life force of your body becomes unbalanced and you end up growing things that you shouldn't be growing, and it saps the rest of your body of nutrients, and ultimately it'll kill you. So what chemotherapy is you voluntarily give yourself radiation poisoning. Radiation poisoning makes you feel horribly sick, because it is poisoning. You lose your hair, you lose your immune system, you lose all sorts of things. I've known several people to go through chemotherapy. They fought, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people in the end say, to hell with this. It's not worth it. The costs of chemotherapy are just too high. I won't pay them. I won't do this to myself anymore. I may die soon, but I'm not going to die feeling the way I do with this radiation poisoning. And that is the way a lot of people ended up feeling about Rome. Rome has long borders that are hard to defend. The Rhine and Danube border alone is ridiculous. Would have been better for the Romans to somehow shorten that. But when they were vigorous, when they were still expanding, it didn't matter. Romans could have a border that looks like anything. They'll still beat anyone who comes along. That did not remain the case. The division of the empire was good and bad. On the good side, it allowed an emperor or two to take care of your local problems. On the bad side, the empires began competing with one another. When the Eastern Roman Empire sent the Huns after the West, that's an example of how bad it had become. A Roman emperor betraying another Roman empire just to get the scary men away from him. That's like a guy saying to a mugger, "Take the woman, just leave me alone!" Which you don't want those to be your last words. You really, really don't. That's a horror show. And it should be. Are there any other reasons that you can think of why the Roman Empire finally falls? I mean, it is around as an empire for 500 years. It's almost exactly 500 years from Augustus' accession in the 20s BC to the loss of Romulus Augustulus in 476 AD. It's a long time. And that's built upon previous 700-800 years of Roman history as a republic. But is there any other reason besides the lead, besides the barbarians, besides the cultural decadence that you can think of, besides the fact that Romans needed barbarians to fight their battles for them? Can you think of anything else that might be a cause of the fall of the empire?
I think this might fall under like the cultural decadence, but like maybe Rome and Romans thought that like they were still the greatest, even though they had all these problems, and instead of aiming to fix the problems, they
Not that we would ever do that. That was a little subtle. We in the United States have been the greatest nation on earth. We've saved more lives than any other country in human history. We really should be proud of that. And as to the fact that we had slavery, we got rid of it! We had official racism, Jim Crow, we got rid of that! We had sexism, we got rid of it to a great extent. And yet people went, you're still not perfect. Who the hell is perfect? But we're no longer as confident as we used to be. Instead of electing strong, vigorous, middle-aged men, we elect old guys. Instead of worrying about putting men back on the moon or even having a spaceship, we worry about people's pronouns and whether a guy dressed as a girl should win a bunch of swimming competitions. No, not my judgment. But he identifies. I don't care! If you believe in women's sports, and I actually kind of do, you want to have women competing. But aren't women people? No! Biologically women, yes.
if people really want to like participate in that so badly, then just make your own league where like there's more people
Fine.
like you.
Yeah. You could have the men's sports, the women's sports, and the question sports. I was going to say something, but fine. Do that. But stop messing around. Well, people can be whoever they want. No. I cannot be a black lesbian woman. As much as I want to try, I cannot be. By the way, I don't. Nor can I be a Jamaican. Because I'm not. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those things. That's not me. Because this is stubborn.
Okay, but like if it makes those people happy, why not just let them do it, right? Like, I don't know.
Let's see.
Just let them be happy.
I have no problem with them being happy behind closed doors. I have a problem with them telling me I have to call a guy who's got a deeper voice than I do a she. That's an impression on me. I'm not doing that. I have a problem with some guy saying, I'm Helga now, and I'm going to compete in women's wrestling. Ha, ha, ha. No, that's oppression.
Issue.
Yes, it is an issue.
They don't really do that.
Yes, they do.
It's not common.
It doesn't. It's becoming more common.
That's
you
true.
also have kids who are sexually confused anyway because they're adolescents saying, I'm going to have gender reassignment surgery when I'm 10 or 11 or 12. That's mutilation. That's horrible. It happens, Chase.
Yeah, I know. That's definitely not right. I'm just saying.
Look. I'm a live and let live die when I can be.
Right.
But this gender stuff is an example, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, of us as a society going, blah, blah, blah. I mean, going completely buck nuts. But I'm just evil. Okay, no, I'm evil. Call me. You don't have to call me evil. If you want to, you can call me evil. Okay, I'm just misguided and stupid.
Just drinking a lot of lead.
Yeah.
Or isn't it?
I'm drinking a lot of lead. Okay.
Isn't the fluoride in toothpaste making everyone stupid?
That's what they thought back in the day. Watch the movie Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Love the Bomb. It has a great story about fluoride in water. It's a good movie, too. You'll like it. It ends with a guy riding an atom bomb like a cowboy down towards Russia.
Okay.
Spoiler alert.
It'll be interesting to see what they do, like just with, those types of roles to just various sports. Because on one hand, like people who say that like I'm this gender, I want to, and it can mean it means like a lot just to be able to compete as that gender.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, if like a man going over to play one of the sports, or they can just end up destroying that, just the competition. Like,
You can't name anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
name one other person.
I could.
But she's
Chase,
just in the
Chase,
news right
Chase,
now. In a
Chase.
year, you won't even remember.
No,
her.
because I don't choose to, because I find it disgusting. Let me tell you something.
No, it's
okay?
because it's like girls 14 to 18 swimming, and it's not really
I
that
don't
big
know.
of a deal.
You say it's not a big deal until it affects you.
Yeah.
If it affects you at some point in the future, you will care. You know why? Because 2 plus 2 equals 4, whether you like it or not. If you know somebody who's got a sort of delusion, and thinking that you're the opposite gender used to be delusional. Now it's a choice. But if I suddenly decide to identify as an ink and jelly donut,
We can legally eat.
and I'm a sympathetic guy. Oh, what's wrong with calling Genorio an ink and jelly donut?
Yeah.
Nothing until he starts expecting you to treat him like one. And there comes a point where society has to say to the person who is off in their own little world, your own little world is fine for you, but it's not fine for us.
Yeah.
We as a society have rules. And one of those rules is 2 plus 2 equals 4, whether you like it or not. And to that point, the woke crowd, who is arguing that we're systemically racist, called 2 plus 2 equals 4 masculinist, cisgendered white supremacy because people of color, which is a new way of saying colored folk, which used to be considered a racist way of calling people, don't do as well at math.
Okay. So what are we supposed to do? Like
What we're supposed to do is adhere to tradition, but be tolerant
We
so that
already acknowledge like transgender and stuff, and we can't just.
we don't, you do. Society does. I don't.
As a society, we
It's
do.
still-
We can't just go back on that. So
Of
how are
course we
supposed
can.
to handle it in
Of
sport?
course we can.
We can't just like.
Transgender people have
Yeah.
Just
always
kidding.
been around.
You tell it.
Yeah.
Hoorah. Thank you, Chase. Thank you, seriously.
Transgender people.
How can he be allowed to teach children?